Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Tony Zhang, chief strategist at OptionsPlay, for a review of the Nordics equity markets and option strategies to trade trends. Tony, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thank you so much for having me back. Looking forward to talking a little bit about interest rates and equity markets here in the Nordics.
And Tony, let's kick it off with that. Let's go through some economic data first, looking at Swedish yields and CPI data.
Yeah, so if we look at yields, the Swedish 10-year yields have largely moderated after having a pretty large move from about 10 basis points to about 45 basis points for the past 4 months or so. And this is really something that is a concern for many equity investors as to if yields continue to move higher, what that means for equity valuations, which are already fairly stretched. As yields continue to rise, this puts an onus on potentially more multiple contraction that we've already started to see here in 2020. And especially when you couple that with the Swedish CPI data that's starting to show month after month of pretty high inflation. And we're seeing this across the board, not only in the Nordics, but also some of it here in the US, labor shortages causing wage growth, and also supply chains causing raw material prices to shoot up substantially. And this is going to cause some potential concerns for fixed income investors as inflation continues to run fairly hot. They're likely going to sell government bonds and drive those yields higher. So when we look at that on balance, in conjunction where the equity markets are currently sitting, which is near overbought conditions, near peak valuations, this is concerning as to how much higher equities can go. The one thing I want to point out here is that this doesn't, in my opinion, suggest that markets are going to correct or necessarily see a significant sell-off as a result of this, because these types of trends tend to be slower moving with respect to interest rates. So I would expect that these are more likely potential caps for equity markets. So when we look at the Stockholm OMX S30, we see that this market has been overbought for pretty much most of 2021 and starting to show the classic signs of exhaustion, classic signs of these markets being overbought. And the 2280 level here on Stockholm continues to be a level that this index is struggling to get above. And we look at Copenhagen, also showing signs of exhaustion, signs of an island top here around $1,800 on the Copenhagen 25. So Copenhagen actually substantially weaker than Stockholm, which has largely led the markets off the pandemic lows last year. The strongest market of the three is actually Helsinki. That continues to be on a fairly slow grind higher here. Not yet overbought, but certainly near stretched valuations. And lastly, Oslo, still on the back of some energy strength, which is starting to gain a little bit of strength here as well. But Oslo also showing classic signs of exhaustion as they continue to make higher highs in price. We're actually seeing momentum no longer confirming those highs. So those are some of the signs that we typically see near a market top. But this, when we look at the fundamentals and the economics, we don't necessarily believe that there's going to be a pullback, but perhaps this could be as far as these equity markets can go for the short run.
And Tony, let's take a look at some trades for these trends that you're looking at. Our first one is with SAAB. It looks like you were playing some defense here.
Exactly. So in this type of market, we prefer, instead of going to those high growth, higher beta tech names, which tend to have the most multiple contraction in these types of environments, we prefer to be more defensive. And SAAB, one of the major defense companies in Sweden, actually is one of the stocks that we like here, recently actually breaking out above a range bound movement that it's had over the past 7 or 8 months here. We're seeing that these defensive names are starting to be the ones that are outperforming here. And this is why I'm looking at using a call debit spread here to take advantage of further upside while reducing my risk to just 2.7% of the underlying stock's value. So especially when you see stocks trade at rich valuations and near these overbought conditions, you want to make sure that you control your risk as much as possible. Using a debit spread here, I'm going out to June. I'm buying the 250, 270 call vertical here, spending about 695 crowns on a 251 crown stock. That's only 2.7% of the stock's value. So limiting my losses and then giving me almost a 2-to-1 risk to reward ratio if SAAB does rally up to that $270 target price by June.
And Tony, the last trade here seeks to capture some yield in a telecom name.
Exactly. So as yields potentially rise here, you definitely want to play a little defense here by looking at some of the higher yielding stocks. And TELIA, one of the highest yielding stocks in the Swedish markets. This is a stock that doesn't move a whole lot, but it has sold off quite a bit heavily over the past month. And I think these are some opportunities to look for a buying opportunity, despite the fact that it's severely oversold. And this is where I'm using a put spread. And the put spread's interesting because it allows me to collect yield as long as TELIA holds these support levels, but it also potentially allows me to own this stock at just shy of 35 crowns. And again, with the stock that yields over 5% yield, that's the type of stock that I would like to own in these types of market environments. So this allows me to capture some yield in the short run if it does bounce, and if it doesn't, I'm able to own this stock and start collecting about a 5% dividend yield on this.
All right, Tony, sounds great. Tell us where our Nordic viewers can get in touch with you.
Yeah, we have a fantastic partnership with Nasdaq in the Nordics that give you access to a wealth of tools with respect to options education, access to the OptionsPlay platform, as well as weekly webinars to help you navigate the markets and options education. You can access all of that free of charge at optionsplay.se.
All right, great. Appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.